Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are standing at the edge of a very steep, very jagged cliff, looking down into the life of a giant. And I don't use that word lightly. We're talking about a man who physically and metaphorically just loomed over the entire landscape of 20th century literature. We are talking about Edward James Hughes.
Ted Hughes.
Better known to the world, of course, as Ted Hughes.
A literary titan. I mean, there really isn't another word for it, is there? He is a figure who casts this shadow that's so long and so complex that it touches almost every corner of modern English poetry. You just can't walk through the library of the last 50 years without bumping into him.
You really can't. We're talking about a man who was Poet Laureate to Queen Elizabeth II, a man who the critics, and you and I have a massive stack of them in our notes today,
A mountain of them.
frequently rank as one of the very best poets of his generation. Some even say one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, full stop. But, and there's always this huge, heavy but, when you bring up the name Ted Hughes, he had it. He is a man whose name is practically impossible to say without immediately thinking of someone else.
Sylvia Plath.
Right. It's this dual legacy, isn't it? That's the hook that grabs everyone, whether they read poetry or not. It's the thing that turns a literary biography into a tabloid sensation.
It does.
On one hand, you have this poet of the wild, the man who saw nature as this brutal, beautiful battleground, a place of, tooth and claw. And on the other hand, you have the husband, the man inextricably linked in the public imagination to the suicide of his first wife, who just happens to be one of the most beloved, analyzed, and dissected poets of all time.
And that creates a tension that just dominates almost every single discussion about him. You really can't escape it. You have the work, which is, it's undeniable. It's energetic. It's violent. It's primal. It physically impacts you when you read it. It's like being hit by a gust of wind or a handful of wet earth.
Yeah.
And then you have the life, which was marked by just extreme tragedy and, frankly, intense public vilification. He was a man who spent his career trying to capture the raw energy of animals, of the wind, of the moors. But in the public imagination, he became this character in a tragedy he couldn't control. He became a villain to some, a tragic figure to others, and a mystery to almost everyone.
And that's our mission today, really. We've got this massive stack of sources here to help us navigate this. We've got biography details, literary criticism that breaks down his meter and his myths. We've got information on the archives held at the British Library and Emory University, which contain thousands of letters and drafts.
And we have the grim accounts of his controversial tenure as the executor of Plath's estate.
Exactly.
It's a complex web of sources because his life was a complex web of events. I mean, there's very little middle ground in the source material we've been looking at. People tend to either revere him as this sort of shamanistic genius or revile him as a patriarchal monster.
And we want to try to look past that, past the tabloid sensation. It's just so easy to get stuck on the gossip, the he said, she said of the 1960s, the feminist backlash, the movies. But we want to understand the writer and the man. We're exploring how his childhood in Yorkshire, his fascination with shamanism, and yes, those personal tragedies forged a poetic voice that was brutal, energetic, and just.
Yeah.
Completely distinct.
Right. We want to understand the genesis of poems like The Thought Fox, which is just a masterclass in creativity. We want to understand the controversy of the burned journals. I mean, why would a writer who knows the value of words better than anyone destroy writing?
Such a huge question.
It is. And we want to understand the silence he kept for decades, a silence he finally broke with birthday letters just before he died.
It is a heavy task, but a necessary one, I think. So let's start at the very beginning. To understand Hughes, you have to understand the landscape that made him. You just can't separate the man from the mud.
You have to go to the cradle of the moors.
Mytholmroyd,
West Riding of Yorkshire. He was born there on August 17th, 1930. 1 Aspinall Street.
Just the sound of that place named Mytholmroyd, it sounds like something out of a saga, doesn't it?
It really does.
It sounds hard, has this heaviness to it, like a stone dropping in water.
And it was. I mean, he was raised among the local farms of the Calder Valley and on a Pennine moorland. This isn't the rolling, gentle, green English countryside of a Jane Austen novel where people have picnics on the lawn and discuss marriage prospects over tea.
No, not at all.
This is rugged country. It's industrial and agricultural, caught in this very specific, gritty intersection. You have the high, wild moors on one side, and then the soot-stained factories down in the valley.
Stark. It feels like a place where you have to fight to exist.
It is. And Hughes claimed his first 6 years shaped everything. That's such a strong statement for a writer to make, that the die was cast before he was even 7 years old. He grew up amidst the harsh realities of working farms. He saw the cycle of life and death every single day. Nature wasn't a pastoral idyll for him. It wasn't about cute lambs frolicking in a field. It was a place of survival. It was mud, blood, and struggle. It was elemental.
So you have this little boy running around this harsh landscape, but there's another shadow hanging over this household, wasn't there? A shadow from a little further away.
The First World War.
Yeah, and I think this is a detail that gets overlooked a lot when people talk about Hughes because the Plath drama just overshadows everything. But his father, William Henry Hughes, was a veteran.
A survivor, really. And that word survivor carries so much weight here. It's not just that he came back. It's that he came back when almost everyone else didn't.
Right.
William Henry Hughes was a joiner of Irish descent. But during the Great War, he enlisted with the Lancashire Fusiliers. He fought at Ypres.
Ypres. I mean, that's synonymous with the absolute horror of trench warfare, gas attacks, mud, total destruction. That is the definition of hell on earth for that generation.
It is. And he was one of only 17 men from his regiment to return from the Dardanelles campaign.
17.
Just 17. Imagine the ghostliness of that, being one of the few who made it back to your hometown when an entire generation of your neighbors just didn't. You walk down the street and every house you pass has a black ribbon on the door except yours.
That is a staggering statistic. It almost feels statistically impossible.
It does. And there's this incredible story, this almost miraculous anecdote that Hughes grew up hearing about his father. We call it the paybook story.
Oh, I love this detail. It's the kind of family myth that becomes foundational for a child, isn't it? The kind of story that gets told at every Christmas until it just feels like a legend. Lay it out for us.
So his father was in the thick of it. The bullets are flying. The chaos is absolute. And at one point, he was hit. A bullet struck him directly in the chest.
Which should be the end of the story. A chest wound in World War I was usually a death sentence.
It should be. But he had his paybook, the little thick booklet soldiers carry that recorded their payments identification, in his breast pocket. The bullet hit the book and lodged in it. It didn't penetrate his heart. That little book literally saved his life.
That's cinematic. It's like something out of a movie, but it was real life for his father.
Right.
I mean, if he had moved that book to his pants pocket, Ted Hughes never exists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But think about the psychological weight of that on a child. Hughes's imagination was just filled with these stories of Flanders fields. He describes it later in his poem, Out. Before he even began writing, his internal world was populated by death and survival. He was living in the aftermath of a massacre, essentially. He knew that his very existence depended on a thick booklet in a pocket stopping a piece of lead. That creates a very specific view of fate and chance. It makes the line between life and death feel incredibly thin.
It makes life feel fragile. It makes death feel like a constant neighbor, someone who lives just next door.
Exactly. He absorbed the silence of his father, the trauma that hung in the house. It wasn't spoken about constantly, but it was there. The no man's land wasn't just in France, it was in the living room. It was in the long pauses at the dinner table.
And that theme of survival, of life and death being right next to each other, seems to just bleed into his hobbies, too. He wasn't just sitting around reading nursery rhymes. He was out there in the muck.
He was a hunter. He loved fishing, swimming, picnicking with the family, but specifically he was fascinated by capturing things.
Capturing, that's a key word for him.
It is. In his book, Poetry in the Making, he recalled being fascinated by animals. He collected and drew toy-led creatures. But it went beyond toys. His older brother Gerald was a gamekeeper.
Right.
Now, a gamekeeper isn't an animal rights activist. A gamekeeper manages the land for hunting.
So Ted was literally the retriever.
Yes. When Gerald shot magpies, owls, rats, curlews, Ted would go get them. He was handling the dead bodies of these animals from a very young age. He wasn't shielded from the violence of the natural world. He was a participant in it. He knew the weight of a dead bird. He knew the smell of it. He knew what its eyes looked like when the light went out of them.
There's a progression here that I find fascinating, and it's crucial to understanding his art. He starts by capturing animals, physically hunting them, retrieving them, and then over time, that impulse shifts.
It's just to poetry. This is the evolution of capturing.
Right, from the physical to the metaphorical.
And this is key to understanding his entire poetic philosophy. He realized that capturing a metaphorical animal in a poem was actually better, more potent, than killing a real one.
How so?
Well, when you kill a fox, it's dead. It's static. It decomposes. It loses its spirit. But if you capture it in a poem, It lives forever. It has a permanent energy. It can be released into the reader's mind over and over and over again.
This leads us directly to The Thought Fox, doesn't it?
It does. This is arguably his most famous early poem. It was written later, when he was in London, but it's a vivid recollection of that Yorkshire landscape. The setting is intimate. He's sitting alone at night trying to write. The window is starless. The clock is ticking. The page is blank.
And then he senses something.
He imagines or summons a fox. Cold, delicately as the dark snow.
I love that imagery. Dark snow. It's so contradictory, but so evocative, it makes you feel the cold.
The fox moves through the darkness, through the snow, touching twig and leaf. It's wary. It's a lane shadowed, but it's coming closer. And eventually, with a sudden sharp hot stink of fox, it enters the dark hole of the head.
And the poem ends with that line. The page is printed.
I get chills every time I read that. It's like the act of writing is a shamanistic summons. He's calling the spirit of the animal into his mind. The fox isn't just a subject he's looking at. It's a force that enters him, his possession. He has captured the fox without hurting it, and now it lives on the page.
And that's the aha moment regarding his creative process. He's not describing the fox, he's manifesting it. This connects to his love of fishing, too. Hughes viewed fishing as an almost religious experience.
He did. He learned a lot about wildlife from a friend's father, a gamekeeper at the Crickhill estate. But fishing was special. It wasn't just a sport for Hughes. It was a connection to the primal world beneath the surface. You cast a line into the dark water, the unconscious, and you wait to see what live, thrashing thing you can pull up into the air. That's exactly how he approached poetry. The poem is the fish, the mind is the water. You have to be patient, you have to be quiet, and you have to be ready to wrestle with whatever bites.
So you have this boy from the moors, obsessed with animals and death, deeply connected to the land, and then he goes off to university, and not just any university, Cambridge.
Pembroke College, Cambridge. He won an open exhibition in English. This was a big deal for a boy from his background.
That feels like a bit of a culture clash, doesn't it? The wild boy of Yorkshire meets the ivory tower, the tweed jackets, and the sherry parties.
And he felt it. He did his national service first, in the RAF, where he spent a lot of time reading Shakespeare and watching grass grow in East Yorkshire.
Literally.
Literally. He was a ground wireless mechanic in an isolated spot, which gave him plenty of time to read. But when he got to Cambridge in 1951 to study English, the reality set in.
He hated it.
He felt stifled. He famously described literary academia as a terrible, suffocating maternal octopus.
Maternal octopus, that is quite the image. Sticky, clinging, dragging you down.
It is. He felt that the academic dissection of texts, the Leavis-style dismantling, as it was called then, named after the famous critic F.R. Leavis, who dominated Cambridge English at the time, was destroying his creative impulse.
Right.
He said he had a talent for it, even a sadistic streak for dismantling texts. But he realized it was a foolish game that was deeply destructive to himself. He felt like he was killing the poetry by analyzing it to death. He was dissecting the animal instead of letting it live.
So he made a move, a pivot. He didn't drop out, but he changed lanes.
In his third year, he transferred. He switched his major to anthropology and archaeology.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is that switch so important for the listener to understand? Why does it matter that he studied bones and tribes instead of sonnets?
Because it moved him away from the polite, genteel tradition of English literature, the drawing rooms and the social manners, and toward folklore, shamanism, and myths. He started reading about totems, about ancient cultures, about how tribal societies viewed the spirit world. This is where he gets the tools to build his later mythology. He's not trying to be a polite English gentleman poet. He's trying to tap into something older, something closer to the bone. He's learning how shamans in other cultures interacted with the spirit world.
He's trading Jane Austen for the witch doctor.
Effectively, yes. And that education gave him a completely different framework than his peers. While they were worrying about rhyme schemes, he was worrying about how to summon rain.
And it's while he's at Cambridge, amidst this intellectual rebellion, that the most significant meeting of his life happens.
February 25th, 1956. The launch party for the St. Botolph's Review.
This is a legendary night in literary history, the kind of night biographers dream about.
It is. Hughes had 4 poems in this review. He was there with his friends, celebrating. And enter Sylvia Plath.
She was there on a Fulbright scholarship.
Right. She was studying at Newnham College, Cambridge. But she wasn't just a student. She was already an accomplished writer. She had published extensively in the U.S., won multiple awards. And she went to that party specifically to meet Hughes.
Oh, really?
She had read his work in the review. She recognized the power in it. She wanted to know the man behind those poems.
She hunted him down.
In a way. And the interaction was electric. It was instant, intense, mutual attraction. There are accounts of this meeting. Plath wrote about it in her journals. It was physical, it was loud, it was violent in its intensity.
Violent.
She bit him on the cheek, drawing blood.
She bit him.
Yes. It was a mark of ownership or recognition. It wasn't a polite handshake. It was two predators meeting in the wild. It set the tone for everything that followed. It was passion, but it was a dangerous kind of passion.
We hear so much about the end of their relationship, but the beginning sounds like a whirlwind romance.
It was incredibly fast. They met in late February. They didn't meet again for a month. But then, on June 16th, 1956, just 4 months after that first meeting, they were married.
June 16, Bloomsday.
Exactly. In honor of the Irish writer James Joyce and his novel Ulysses, that tells you everything about how seriously they took literature. It wasn't just a job, it was their religion. They married on the day celebrating literature. Plath's mother was the only guest at the wedding.
And in those early days, it wasn't a tragedy, it was a partnership. I think people forget that.
It was a period of avid mutual support. We have to remember that. It wasn't all doom and gloom from the start. They lived in Cambridge, then America. They were both writing furiously. Plath typed his manuscripts. In fact, she submitted his collection, The Hawk in the Rain, to a competition run by the Poetry Center in New York.
She did. So she was instrumental in his first big break.
Absolutely. She believed in his genius. She was his biggest champion. The prize was publication by Harper. It won, and it gained widespread critical acclaim. He won a Somerset Maugham Award. Suddenly, Hughes wasn't just a student with potential. He was a star.
And the critics noticed something different about him immediately, didn't they? It goes back to that sound we talked about.
They did. They noted his style was distinct. At the time, there was a movement called the movement. Very rational, ironic, understated poetry. Philip Larkin was the face of it. It was very English, very contained. Hughes blew that out of the water. While others were using genteel Latinate sounds, words derived from Latin, very flowery, very smooth, very intellectual, Hughes was using hard-hitting trochees and spondees.
Trochees and spondees. Okay, for those of us who haven't brushed up on our poetic meter lately, what does that actually sound like?
Think of a drum. It sounds like Middle English. It sounds like Beowulf. It's percussive. A trochee is a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed one, D-U-M, da. A spondee is two stressed syllables, D-U-M, D-U, and da. So instead of a flowing river, it sounds like rocks banging together, bam, 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 bam. It felt ancient and modern at the same time. It cut through the politeness of 1950s poetry like a knife. It sounded like the Yorkshire moors.
It's the sound of boots sucking out of the mud.
Exactly. It's physical language. It's language that has weight.
So they are the golden couple. They move to America, where he teaches at UMass Amherst. They meet the artist Leonard Baskin, who becomes a lifelong collaborator. Then they come back to England in 1959. They have children, Frida and Nicholas. They buy a house in Devon, Court Green, in 1961. It sounds perfect.
On the surface. But we know now, from biographies and later from birthday letters, that there were chasms of difference between them. Plath had a history of depression and suicide attempts that she didn't fully reveal to him until later. Her mental health was precarious, but they were trying. They were building a life, planting a garden, raising children.
And then came 1962, the summer of 1962. This is where the story turns.
This is the beginning of the tragedy.
Hughes begins an affair
with Asia Weevil. She had been subletting their London flat with her husband, David Weevil, who was also a poet. It's a tangled web. Asia was charismatic, beautiful, and worldly. The affair was the catalyst. It shattered the domestic life they had built. Under the cloud of this affair, Plath and Hughes separated in the autumn of 1962.
And this leads to that terrible winter.
One of the coldest winters in British history. The Big Freeze of 1963. The snow was feet deep. Plath moves back to London with the two children, Frida and Nicholas. The pipes are freezing. There's severe frost. She's isolated. It was a brutal time physically and emotionally. She was writing the aerial poems at this time, waking up at 4 a.m. to write before the kids woke up. It was a creative explosion fueled by rage and sorrow.
And on February 11, 1963,
Plath takes her own life. She places her head in a gas oven while her children are asleep in the next room. She had carefully taped up the door to their room to protect them from the gas, leaving mugs of milk and bread for them.
Where was Hughes?
He was in London. But he wasn't with her. He was with his lover at the time, Susan Alliston.
That detail, knowing he was with someone else while this was happening, it adds such a layer of guilt to the narrative.
And Hughes was devastated.
Yeah.
To be clear about that. Whatever the state of their marriage, this was a cataclysmic event for him. He wrote poems like The Howling of Wolves and Song of a Rat immediately after expressing this raw animal grief. And then he went silent.
Right.
Poetically silent for 3 years. He focused on broadcasting, essays, reviews, anything but his own poetry. He couldn't access that part of himself.
But silence in his poetry didn't mean silence in the public sphere, because now he had a new role. He wasn't just the grieving husband, he was the literary executor.
And this is where the controversy really ignites. This is what defines the next 30 years of his life. As her widower, he controlled her estate. He controlled her words. He owned the copyright to her genius.
And he made some choices that people are still angry about today.
He oversaw the posthumous publication of her manuscripts, including Ariel in 1965. This is the book that made her a legend. But he edited it. He changed the order of the poems from what she had intended.
How so?
She ended her manuscript with a note of hope, with bees flying in spring. He ended his version with death.
And he left poems out.
He did. He omitted poems like The Jailer and The Rabbit Catcher.
Oh, these are powerful poems.
Well, those poems depicted themes of domestic abuse and rape. They were incredibly harsh, arguably directed at him. His defense later was that they were personally aggressive. He said he omitted them to protect the children. He didn't want them growing up reading their mother describing their father as a jailer. He felt a duty to his children that superseded his duty to literature.
But to the feminist critics emerging in the late 60s and 70s,
To them, this looked like censorship. It looked like the patriarch silencing the woman even after death. It looked like he was trying to curate her legacy to protect his own reputation. They felt he was sanitizing her anger to make himself look better.
and then there's the journal, the infamous burned journal.
Yes, this is the hardest one for scholars to swallow. Hughes admitted to destroying Plath's final journal, the one that detailed their last few months together. The maroon-backed ledger.
He burned it.
Destroyed it. He claimed he did it to protect their children, Frida and Nicholas. He didn't want them to ever read the painful details of that time, the breakdown of the marriage, the despair.
But later, in a letter to The Guardian in 1989, he said something fascinating. He wrote, "The fantasia about Sylvia Plath is more needed than the facts."
That is a loaded statement. The fantasia is more needed than the facts. It suggests he felt the public had already created a myth, the fantasy of St. Sylvia and the demon Ted, and the messy truth, which might have been even more painful or complex, wasn't worth preserving in the face of that overwhelming desire for a story.
He felt he couldn't compete with the myth.
Exactly. But to historians, destroying the final words of a genius is considered a cardinal sin. It's burning history.
And the backlash was fierce.
Fierce is an understatement. It was vitriolic. Activists claimed he murdered her. They would show up at his readings chanting "murderer." It was a trial by public opinion, and he had no defense.
There was that poem by Robin Morgan, right?
Arraignment, it accused him directly. It linked him to the battery and rape themes in Plath's work. Hughes actually threatened to sue for libel, and the poem was suppressed in some editions. But the sentiment was out there. He was the villain of the story.
It got so bad that people would travel to Plath's grave in Heptonstall.
And vandalize it. They would chisel the name Hughes off the gravestone, repeatedly, leaving only Sylvia Plath. They wanted to erase him from her history, just as they felt he had tried to erase parts of her work. It became a battleground. He would have the stone repaired, and they would deface it again.
It's a war over memory, a war over who owns the narrative. And then, as if this story couldn't get any darker, history repeats itself.
1969, 6 years after Plath.
Isha Weevil.
The woman Hughes left Plath for. They had stayed together, on and off. They had a daughter together named Shura. On March 23, 1969, Isha Weevil took her own life.
And the method?
Gas asphyxiation. The same way Plath died. But even more tragically, she killed her daughter, Shura, as well. She gave the child sleeping pills and turned on the gas.
That is horrific.
It is unspeakable. And for the public, this cemented the narrative. Hughes wasn't just a bad husband. He was seen as a destructive force, a Bluebeard figure. 2 women, dead by the same method, in his orbit. It seemed to confirm the darkest suspicions about him, that he was a man who destroyed the woman who loved him.
So how do you rate poetry after that? I mean, how do you create art when your life has become this gothic horror story?
You reinvent the universe, you create Crow.
Crow, this is one of his most famous and most divisive works. It came out in 1970, right in the shadow of all this death.
Crow is unlike anything else in English poetry. It's a cosmology. It was written during his relationship with Weevil and published after her death. It is dedicated to the memory of Aisha and Shura. Crow is a character, a trickster, a survivor, an alter ego.
It's not a nice bird.
No. It's apocalyptic. It's bitter. It's cynical.
Well,
But it's also weirdly childlike. There's a specific poem, Crow Blacker Than Ever, that captures this perfectly.
do you have it there?
I do. Listen to this imagery. When God, disgusted with man, turned towards heaven, and man, disgusted with God, turned towards Eve, things look like falling apart. But Crow nailed them together, nailing heaven and earth together.
So man cried, but with God's voice.
Yeah.
And God bled, but with man's blood.
Exactly. Crow grinned, crying, "This is my creation," flying the black flag of himself.
Wow. It's like he's saying the universe is broken, God is bleeding, and this ugly black bird is the only thing holding it together with a rusty nail.
That's it. He moved away from standard nature poetry into something much darker, a surreal totemic cosmology. He was trying to find a myth that could contain the violence he had experienced. He couldn't write pretty poems about flowers anymore. He needed a monster to explain the world. He needed a survivor who could eat anything, endure anything. That was Crow.
And this brings us back to his view of nature in general. We talked about the moors earlier. But Hughes's animals, the hawk, the jaguar, the crow, they aren't cute. They aren't Disney characters.
They are absolutely not cute. They are Darwinian. Look at hawk roosting. The poem's written from the hawk's point of view. It's arrogant. The hawk says, "I kill where I please because it is all mine." It says, "There's no sophistry in my body. My manners are tearing off heads."
Tearing off heads. It's pure power, no morality.
It is. Hughes believed that we, as modern humans, suffer from a dualistic split in our psyche. We separated ourselves from our animal nature. We pretend we aren't violent. We pretend we aren't driven by instinct. His goal with these poems wasn't just to describe a bird. It was to heal that split, to force us to look at the violence and beauty of the world without flinching.
To accept the hawk inside us.
Exactly. Because if we deny it, it comes out in other, worse ways like war.
But here is the paradox of Ted Hughes. He wasn't just writing nightmares, he was also writing for children. And this is a side of Hughes that people often forget, or they don't connect it to the tragedy, the Iron Man.
Yes, or the Iron Giant, as movie fans might know it from the animated film.
I grew up watching that movie. I had no idea it was written by Ted Hughes until much later.
And the origin of that story is heartbreaking. He wrote it specifically to comfort his children, Frida and Nicholas, after their mother's suicide.
Really?
Yes. Think about the story. It's about a giant who is broken apart. He falls off a cliff and shatters. And he has to pull himself back together piece by piece, an ear here, a hand there.
Right.
It's about a monster finding a place in the world. It's a story of reconstruction and healing. It stands in such stark contrast to Crow.
It shows his range. He could channel that darkness, but he could also offer this incredible tenderness and hope for his children. He was trying to give them a myth of survival, a way to put themselves back together.
And he didn't stop there with children. He served as the president of the Charity Farms for City Children, established by his friend Michael Morpurgo.
What was the goal there?
He wanted kids from the city to experience the mud and the reality of the farm, just like he did in Mythological. He believed the connection to the land was vital for the human soul. He didn't want nature to be an abstract concept for them. He wanted them to get their hands dirty.
So we move into the later years. He has remarried to Carol Orchard in 1970, a nurse. They stay together until the end, finding a stability he lacked before. And then, in 1984, the establishment calls.
The Poet Laureate.
He succeeds John Betjeman, but he wasn't the first choice, was he?
No, Philip Larkin was the preferred nominee. Larkin is another giant of British poetry, famous for his glum, witty verse. But Larkin declined. He had writer's block, his health was failing, and he felt he had lost his creative momentum.
Yeah.
He famously said he wouldn't be any good at it, so Hughes took the mantle.
It seems like an odd fit. The wild man of the moors, the shaman, the man with the scandalous past, writing poems for the queen.
It was a bit awkward. He wrote poems for royal occasions, collected in Rain Charm for the duchy. They aren't generally considered his best work. It's hard to bring that raw Crow energy to a royal wedding or a christening.
You can't exactly write about tearing off heads at a royal baptism.
You really can't. But he took the role seriously. He used the platform to advocate for things he cared about.
Particularly river conservation.
The fishing. Again, it always comes back to the water. In 1994, alarmed by the decline of fish in rivers local to his Devonshire home, he became a founding trustee of the West Country Rivers Trust.
He wasn't just a figurehead.
No, he was active. He saw the decline of fish populations as a sign of environmental collapse. He understood that if the rivers are dying, the land is dying. He was an environmentalist deeply connected to the local ecosystem long before it was a mainstream celebrity cause.
But while he was being the laureate, he was also diving deep into the esoteric. He wrote this massive prose work called Shakespeare and the Goddess of Complete Being.
1992. This book, well, it had a mixed reception. He was obsessed with Robert Graves as the White Goddess. He believed there was this single, overarching mythic structure to all great poetry, the great goddess, the cycle of birth and death. And he tried to apply that to Shakespeare's entire canon.
That sounds ambitious.
It was monumental. Some people thought it was an important original appreciation. Others dismissed it as idiosyncratic. Basically, Hughes projecting his own shamanistic belief system onto Shakespeare.
And Hughes himself thought writing it hurt him.
He did. He later suggested that the time spent writing that prose, that analytical, heavy prose, was directly responsible for a decline in his health. He believed that writing poetry released energy, but writing prose consumed it. He felt he had exhausted his vital force on that book.
And then, in 1998, just months before his death, he drops a bomb.
Birthday letters.
After 35 years of silence, after refusing to discuss Plath, after burning the journal, after the grave vandalism, he publishes a collection explicitly addressing their relationship.
It was a literary sensation.
All right.
I mean, you have to understand, people had been waiting for this for decades. They assumed he would never speak, and suddenly here it was. It wasn't defensive, it wasn't angry, it was tender.
It won the Whitbread Prize.
It did. It's a conversation with her ghost. He addresses her directly as you throughout the book. He revisits their meeting, their marriage, the tragedy. He admits his own bewilderment. He describes the chasms between them. It was his way of reclaiming the narrative, not by fighting the critics, but by speaking to her. It broke the dam.
And there was even one more poem discovered much later, right?
Last Letter. Discovered in the British Library Archives in 2010, it details the 3 days leading up to her suicide.
What does it say?
It describes what happened, the frantic driving between London and Devon, the confusion, the moment of the news. Carol Ann Duffy, the Poet Laureate at the time, called it his darkest poem. She said it was almost unbearable to read. It shows that he was replaying those final moments in his head for his entire life. He never really escaped that weekend in 1963. It was a wound that never closed.
So let's bring this to a close. The final days.
He was appointed to the Order of Merit by Queen Elizabeth II just before he died. That is the highest honor in the land, a personal gift from the sovereign. It was the establishment finally embracing him fully, acknowledging his greatness despite the controversy.
And he died in 1998.
October 28, 1998. He suffered a fatal heart attack while undergoing treatment for colon cancer in London. At his funeral, Seamus Heaney, another Nobel Prize winner, a fellow poet, and a close friend, gave the eulogy.
What did he say?
He described Hughes as a tower of tenderness and strength. He said, "By his death, the veil of poetry is rent and the walls of learning broken."
A tower of tenderness and strength. That's beautiful. It contrasts so sharply with the monster image from the tabloids. But the tragedy didn't end with his death.
No. The lingering shadows. His son, Nicholas Hughes, the little boy who was sleeping in the next room when Plath died, the boy for whom the Iron Man was written.
What happened to him?
He became a marine biologist. He moved to Alaska. He studied fish again, the connection to the water, just like his father. But he suffered from depression. And in 2009, he took his own life.
It's too much tragedy for one family. It feels biblical.
It really is. It's a Grecian tragedy in modern times. And we should mention Carol Hughes, his widow. She married him in 1970 and stayed with him until the end. She defended his name. She broke her own silence in 2013 to publish a memoir. She was the one who had to live through the storm of public hatred alongside him for over 40 years.
So what does this all mean when we look at the stack of sources, the biography, the poems, the scandals? What is the takeaway?
I think we have to go back to the thought fox.
The fox entering the dark hole of the head.
Hughes spent a lifetime trying to capture the raw energy of nature. He wanted to bring the fox, the hawk, the crow onto the page. He succeeded in that. The page is printed. His work stands as some of the most powerful in the English language.
But there's a question that remains.
Yes. I wonder if his greatest struggle wasn't with nature, but with his own narrative. He tried to capture his own life, his own truth, in the face of a public that preferred the fantasia. They wanted the villain, they wanted the monster, and in Birthday Letters, he finally tried to capture the reality of his grief.
It's a provocative thought. Hughes spent his life as the hunter, capturing animals in verse. But in the end, was he the one being hunted? Was he the fox, and the public the hounds?
That is the question. And maybe the answer is in the poems.
We'll leave you with that. If you haven't read Crow or Birthday Letters, go pick them up. Decide for yourself. Don't just read the headlines. Read the poems.
The page is printed.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.